This week we continue our look at battery facts, and if you haven't seen the previous video, I suggest you go back and have a look. There's a link in the description. We're going to be looking at mains charging, that's charging from your shore power. We're also going to be looking at alternator charging, that's charging from your engine or main engine alternator. Then we're going to look at solar charging. We'll look at Impavidus chargers and PWM and see what the advantages are, as there's many on the market. We'll also look at bifacial panels. We're not sponsored by any of the manufacturers of these products, and so we're free to say exactly what we think. Enjoy the video, guys. Let's look at solar charging. There are four basic types of panel. Monocrystalline. These panels are made from pure silicone wafers and are the most efficient and expensive type of solar panel. They have black PV cells with rounded edges and are the best choice for energy and efficiency. Polycrystalline. These panels are made by melting silicone and pouring it into moulds, making them cheaper to manufacture than monocrystalline panels. They are less efficient than monocrystalline panels, but are comparable in durability and longevity. These days we are seeing a lot more thin film panels. These panels are made by layering thin layers of photovoltaic material on top of each other. They are least efficient of all the solar panels, but they are the cheapest option. They're flexible and can wrap around objects, making them ideal for places where there is limited space, like on boats. Another type of solar panel is the bifacial solar panel, which can capture sunlight on both the front and the back of the panel. This can make them more efficient than traditional solar panels. They are the biggest growing market in marine solar panels. A transparent backsheet and bifacial cells allow light which is being reflected to generate power via the back of the cell, not just the front. Pointing your panels towards the sun, both in angle and direction, will increase their efficiency. However, that's not always possible on a boat. Where you sail your boat, i.e. its location, will also have a large effect on the amount of energy you can produce from solar. As you can see from this comparison, MPPT are both more efficient, more versatile and more compatible with various types or voltages of panel. However, you will find that some solar regulators or chargers marked up as MPPT are not. They're actually PWM. Be careful what you buy. You can see from these two graphs here the comparison of output between MPPT and PWM is much higher from the MPPT. The reason for that is that the higher voltage from the MPPT regulator allows a higher wattage to be transmitted to your batteries. There is a mathematical relationship between watts, amps and volts. If we want to know the watts, we simply multiply the amps by the volts. If we want to find the amps, then the watts are divided by the volts. And if we want to find the volts, we divide the watts by the amps. That's the power triangle. So hypothetically, if a PWM regulator allows 16 volts at 10 amps, your panel will produce 160 watts. But the maximum power point can allow 30 volts through at 10 amps. That's 300 watts. Now this is just a mathematical example, but you see how it works. The MPPT is much more efficient because the voltage from the panel is higher. When you add to this Ohm's law, the higher voltage overcomes the resistance in the cables. It is always better to transmit electricity at a higher voltage because there's lower losses, and that's because of the resistance in the cables and the joints. We'll go into that perhaps another time. Now obviously I've simplified this because not all of us are budding electricians, but that's the basic kind of principles and laws behind it. If you want to know more, go and look at our series Boat Electrical Made Easy. You'll find it fascinating and you'll learn an awful lot. There's a link in the description. Before we go any further, I'd just like to say we're not sponsored, and the products that you see here are not necessarily endorsed by us. They are shown for illustration purposes only. So by way of a little recap, MPPT or maximum power point tracking and PWM pulse width modulation are both types of solar charge controllers that regulate the power from the solar panel to charge the battery. The main difference between the two is that MPPT controllers are more efficient and use newer technology to operate at the panel's maximum power voltage. PWM controllers operate at the battery voltage or just slightly above it. Now that you know that all solar charge regulators are not created equally, and some on the big selling sites may not actually be MPPT charge regulators, we would strongly suggest that you only buy this piece of equipment from a reputable dealer or company, and you have a good look at the technical data sheets before you do so. Now, in order to get the maximum voltage into your MPPT charge regulator, you'll need to put your panels in series. Panels in series will have twice the voltage of panels in parallel. There are arguments around shading and what's best from a particular panel, but we've found with all our panels over the years that running them in series rather than in parallel has given us a much better output overall. Some of the newer panels have a lot more diodes in them, which helps with shading, but if you put your panels in the right place in the first place, then the shading won't be such an issue. Again, you need to check the technical data on both the panels and the charge regulator that you're going to use. Some systems allow you to connect multiple devices or chargers in a network and they all talk to each other. This way you can control them with a computer or by Bluetooth on a phone or tablet. Understanding how your charge regulator works and when your batteries are likely to be 100% charge allows you to do other things with the surplus power, like running a water maker. With our system in the summer, we're just about fully charged at 10 o'clock, and therefore after 10 is when we run our water maker or something else which has a heavy current draw, perhaps via our inverter. And now to the age-old question, how much solar? Well, we suggest that you need 200 watts of solar panels per 100 amp hours or 1200 watt hours of usable battery capacity. In the case of lithium, this would be a 100 amp hour battery, or AGM, somewhere around 200 amp hours. More solar panels are just going to charge your battery faster or more adequately in low light conditions, i.e. more power at the start and finish of the day, in low light conditions or on a cloudy day. If you have 400 watts of solar, you will charge twice as fast as 200 watts of solar, in theory, but only if your battery can charge at that rate. Look at the charge rates for your batteries. We've put them in that table. This is where lithium has a distinct advantage over lead-acid batteries. Typically, lithium batteries can charge at about 50% of their overall capacity. Let's simplify that. A 100 amp hour battery can charge at 50 amps, and a 200 amp hour battery bank can charge at 100 amps. You simply can't do that with lead-acid based batteries. Let's put that in perspective. Lithium batteries can charge 8 times quicker than a lead-acid battery. On a good sunny day, you'll have all of those extra hours of sunshine to do something else with. If you use lead-acid batteries, whether they're gel, AGM or conventional leisure-type cells, the alternator you have on your boat engine will probably charge through a splitter or isolator. This is there to prevent the engine start battery being flattened. In the old days we used to use a 1, 2 or both switch. You can still buy them, and some boats still have them. The reason they're not used so much now is if you forget to switch them back or you switch them off while the engine's running, you can destroy your alternator. Or flatten your house batteries, as well as your starter battery, that is. These isolators are wired into the system, something like this, and there are two types. There's those that use a traditional diode and those that use MOSFETs. MOSFETs are a type of switch, like an electronic switch, transistor. I won't go into that now. Diodes are like a one-way valve. They only allow electricity to flow in one direction. Both diodes and MOSFETs can be used in this way. With this type of isolator, you can charge either from an alternator or your charger and use more than one battery. Both MOSFETs and diodes have an internal resistance, so they do drop the voltage a little. Diodes more than MOSFETs. The important thing is that these are basically automatic. You don't do the switching. So let's give you a for instance or an example of charging with an alternator. Let us assume that you have 100 amp hours of lithium or 200 amp hours of AGM. This would give you a usable power of about 1000 watt hours. Overnight your lights, fridge, TV, laptop and anything else that you've been running will have used around about 300 watt hours of power. Your battery monitor will now be showing 70%. And so it's a cloudy day today and you're not that worried because you have 3-hour motor sail to your next anchorage. You start the engine, warm it up and lift the anchor with your electric windlass. The engine is doing about 800 RPM. And at this slow RPM your standard alternator will only be producing around 15 amps. You come out of the anchorage and mosey around and after 10 minutes you increase the engine to 1800 RPM. Your normal cruising speed. But look at the chart. How many amps are you now producing from a standard alternator? It's not until your engine gets up to somewhere near 3000 RPM that you're getting the best out of your alternator. Alternators are designed to cool themselves with an internal or an external fan. If you run your alternator at full output at a lower RPM, it will very quickly overheat. And so charging through an alternator with lithium, you need to regulate the temperature of the alternator by shutting down the amperage slightly. Now, alternators don't work at 100% efficiency. It's the heat caused by the inefficiency of the alternator which is the killer. Let's look at it a different way. Typically an alternator is only 50% efficient. If you put in 2000 watts of power, which is 2.68 horsepower, it will only produce 1000 watts of electricity. The rest will be heat. At lower RPMs, the alternator cannot dissipate this heat as the cooling fans are not rotating fast enough. Regulators with temperature sensors choke the alternator output, and it's this that then reduces the heat. There are a number of these regulators which you can buy off the shelf, or you can buy an alternator and regulator that are designed to work together, but these are expensive. So to recap, you either need an alternator big enough to produce the amperage at low RPM, or a system that chokes down your existing alternator and stops it overheating. Remember, a standard alternator and regulator is okay with lead-acid batteries. You don't need this setup. What you can actually do is to fool your alternator into thinking it's charging a conventional lead-acid battery in order to charge your lithium batteries. How do we do that? Well, we use a battery-to-battery charger, like one of these. The battery-to-battery charger runs off of one of your lead-acid batteries. You could use your engine battery or a buffer battery, as I've shown here in this wiring diagram. The buffer battery is a lead-acid battery, AGM or gel, and what that does is it connects to a battery-to-battery charger. Using the buffer battery or your engine start battery, the alternator reacts as though it's charging a lead-acid system. The battery-to-battery charger then charges the lithium. If the lithium should fail or the BMS disconnect, then the buffer battery or starter battery protects the alternator. However, the alternator can still get quite hot, as battery-to-battery chargers are also inefficient. Newer battery-to-battery chargers are more efficient. However, this inefficiency still causes quite a lot of heat, and you may need some cooling. If you have a smaller alternator, say 60 amps output or so, you may only be able to run a 30 amp battery-to-battery charger. For most people, charging with a mains charger, whether that's through your generator or the shell power, is likely to be the most efficient way of charging your batteries, and probably the best. There are certainly plenty of mains chargers on the market, and some of them contain an inverter as well, like the Multiplus series from Victron. So let's take a look at how mains chargers actually work. Your AC current, alternating current, from your shore power or from your generator will come into a transformer. A transformer is basically two coils of wire around an iron core. There's more about this in our Boat Electrical Made Easy series. A process of electromagnetic induction drops the voltage down from 120 or 240 to around 14 volts. But this voltage will still be AC, alternating current. We need DC to charge batteries. A simple battery charger uses those one-way valves again, diodes, to change alternating current into DC, direct current. We call this diode configuration a rectifier. It rectifies AC current into DC current. Every time the AC current peaks or troughs, the one-way valves only allow the current to go in one direction. This makes one side positive and one side negative. Again, I've made this explanation as simple as I can. Most boats have more than one battery. They'll have one for the engine, a separate one for the domestic, and perhaps one for a bow thruster. Because these batteries all have different priorities, it's not a good idea just to connect them all together. Two reasons. Firstly, you'll want your engine battery to have priority on charging. It's the one you'll want to have charged first. If you were to simply link the batteries together as you see here, none of the batteries would have the priority charge, and all of them would charge the lowest first. One battery would simply charge the other, and all of the batteries, because they're in parallel, would simply work as one battery. You'd get in a right old pickle. And so a modern battery charger will have more than one output. The outputs are separated by electronic components, sometimes diodes, heavy-duty capacitors and transistors. You don't need to know how the circuit works, you just need to know that each one is separate and each one is prioritised in accordance with the handbook or manual. When looking for a battery charger, always buy one that has a battery temperature sensor fitted in to the battery charger. This way the temperature of your batteries can be monitored. We'll go into why that's necessary perhaps in a later video. A good battery charger will allow the charger to be set to different charging profiles. This one here is shown in lead acid mode, but you should be able to change it to gel, AGM or even lithium. All of these profiles are slightly different, especially lithium. Like the profiles on your solar regulator, they should be fairly easy to change. Here's an example. This particular charger has what's called dip switches. These can be set to give the charger a different charging profile. In the table you can see here. And dip switches are very simple. They have an on or an off. What each switch does is written in the manual, in the table. By moving these dip switches, you are quite literally programming the charger to do what you want it to do in the way you want to do it. Using the battery manufacturer's data, it's quite simple to work out where your dip switches need to be for that type of battery. Some chargers or charger inverters will allow you to program them through the Bluetooth connection if they have one, or change the programming or settings within another program which you use on a computer or a Mac, or even on a tablet. We've actually shown you how to do this in a previous video. Have a look at our change to lithium videos. Whichever charger you decide that you want for your boat, it's imperative that you have the settings in the right positions for the type of battery you have, and that it is isolated and fused in the correct way. In the next video, we'll talk about the do's and don'ts of charging batteries. We'll give you some good safety tips, and we'll tell you what you certainly shouldn't do. Until next time guys, please like and subscribe and share with a friend. Making videos takes a lot of our time and a lot of resources, and we need to keep those resources up. If you'd like to help us make videos, go to patreon.com and look for SV Impavidus. For the price of a cup of coffee or a pint of beer, you could help us to keep making videos. They don't make themselves, and they take a lot of resources to do.